All right, so I don't have a lot of notes today, but I'm just gonna go with whatever's on my mind. So I'm listening to a podcast with Sam Harris, who's I think's my favorite podcast at the moment. I don't agree with everything he says, I think, but I really admire his seeming like that he seems to truly and authentically strive to have an accurate view of reality, to have a changeable mind, right? And to understand things to a deep degree, which I think I've learned a lot from listening to his podcast. But there's a guest on today, I can't remember his name, but they're talking kind of about like authority and how there's just this increasing distrust of authority within like American culture and whatnot. But what was so interesting is this guy brought up a point that it's kind of been my own theory as to what's been going on with the nationalism movements in lots of different countries, also Brexit and Trump. And first of all, it's interesting that everybody feels like we need some sort of explanation, right, for what's going on. But I think it speaks to a deeper issue, right? There's a lot of unrest and just a lot of uncertainty about the future, maybe in a way that there never has been. And the reason why I think that is just because of technology. And this has kind of been my theory for Brexit and for Trump and for nationalism and its growing popularity. For me, it all comes back to technology. And so if you look at like the voting for Brexit, it was overwhelmingly people over the age of 65, right? And I think people who are that age feel so displaced from society due to technological like progress and the rate of change in our society. And even me, who's like, I feel like I'm part of the tech industry, and I still feel very like that it's going too fast for me oftentimes. And so I think so if you feel like you can't connect to the world anymore, right? That you can't understand it, that it's leaving you behind, that it's moving too fast. Obviously that's an anxious feeling. And I think that, in my opinion, can create some anxiety, but also a need to blame, right? And so blame is put on like immigrants, right? And just change in general, right? And there becomes this overwhelming desire to want to go back to how things were. But I think the dialogue doesn't address the source, which I think is technology, right? And because like, I don't know, like things are just, it's all happening very quickly. But it was really interesting because I heard this perspective that I've had for a long time, and I still maintain, I think it's obviously much more complicated than that now, but, and I think also in general, any one explanation for what's going on is obviously not good enough. But I heard that exact idea validated by this guy who wrote a book about like, this concept of distrusting authority and how it's affecting society, and which was really interesting. He kind of just mentioned it in passing, but it was kind of interesting to hear that coming from someone else as well. I don't know, I guess I'd like to see a discussion about that happening, right? And there's lots of studies about how technology is affecting us socially, even on an individual level, but also the way we interact. And it's clear that there's a lot of problems with it. I think it's also clear there's lots of good. Like I was just having a conversation the other night about how quickly the LGBT movement happened. And that's something that I didn't realize until I think I heard it in a podcast. But yeah, that movement happened very, very quickly. And there's this chaotic like environment of social media and the internet. Like so much is happening, and the outrage machine is like seems to be such a horrible thing because it gets triggered so often. But like sometimes it gets it right, and sometimes it ends up in real change. And so perhaps it can if we can just learn to like put up our defenses in times when it gets it wrong, right? And kind of help it along when it gets it right. I think another example of it getting right is a lot of the sexual sexual harassment stuff that's happening with Hollywood and with all these different within the entertainment industry. I think is a one instance where it's getting it very right? It's identifying stuff in our culture that really needs to change, and perhaps those type of changes, and maybe like lots of women are saying, like, they're being asked, why haven't you come forward before? And the answer's always been, well, often they do and no one believes them, right? And just for some reason we have a society now where the platforms are in place, or this outrage machine is calibrated and capable of picking up those ideas. So I think it's probably a good thing in a lot of ways. But I don't know, still remains this idea of like what's going on in America, what's going on in the rest of the world, and the most troubling part is what this guy is talking about, the distrust of authority, right, and experts, right, and there's this idea of elitism. And it's interesting, I never thought about it before, but Sam Harris and this other guy also brought up this idea that, like, when you want, like, people complain about elitism when it comes to politics, right? They think we can't trust a politician that's not like us and that doesn't relate with us. But we sure as hell want an elitist when it comes to our doctor, right? We don't want someone that's relatable. We don't want someone that would be fun to hang out with. We want somebody that's obsessive and expert in their field. We don't care about elitism. In fact, we want elitism when it comes to people who are flying airplanes, who are doing very potentially dangerous things, right? So why wouldn't we want someone like that leading our country, right, and being our government leaders? And I think I have to agree with that, right? It's probably much better to have somebody who doesn't seem necessarily that I'd like to hang out with them, but is qualified and thinks things through more than I do. But that is almost contrary to democracy. There's this idea that my voice should be heard, yet it's so clear that individuals don't have, like the general population, myself included, I spend a ton of time watching shitty TV shows, right, and filling my brain with mindless entertainment. I would much rather have a representative that wasn't like me in that way. And I have to concede that when I have ideas about how the world should be run, probably somebody who isn't spending so much time watching TV is more qualified to make decisions like that, you know what I mean? Anyways, it's a very complicated issue, and I've always considered myself to be such an optimist with so many things, but lately, there's just idea after idea after idea that seems to point to a bleak future if we don't turn things around in some way. And this distrust of authority and like lack of trust of science and just this idea that your own opinion, that I don't know, it's such a complicated idea, but those ideas give me some pause those ideas throw a wrench in my optimism machine, right? So it's a couple of things I'm trying to think about, and but we'll talk to you later. Peace.